Have you ever wondered what secrets lurk behind Hollywood's golden smile? The era of glamour and glitz wasn't as picture-perfect as the movies would have you believe. Some of Tinseltown's most beloved legends hid cruelty and scandal behind their flawless facades. In this shocking exposé, we pull back the velvet curtain to reveal the real stories behind the silver screen's brightest stars. These are the tales of betrayal, manipulation, and heartbreak that the studios never wanted you to know. From legendary actresses to infamous leading men, here are the 21 Golden Age celebrities whose real lives were far darker than their most dramatic roles. Miriam Hopkins. With a porcelain smile and an air of sophistication, Miriam Hopkins charmed audiences throughout the 1930s and 1940s. But for those unlucky enough to work alongside her, that delicate exterior masked a ruthless competitor. Hopkins wasn't content to simply be a star. She had to be the star, and she would do almost anything to stay on top. Her feuds with fellow actresses became legendary in old Hollywood. Bette Davis, herself no shrinking violet, described working with Hopkins as a masterclass in sabotage. On the set of The Old Maid, Hopkins reportedly faked tears in scenes just to force retakes, hoping to steal precious screen time. And when she didn't get her way, directors braced themselves for tantrums and backstage intrigue. Hopkins was also known for her off-screen machinations. If another actress landed a coveted role, Hopkins didn't see it as a loss. She saw it as a challenge. Whispers of mysterious firings and last-minute script changes followed her from studio to studio. Colleagues called her the ultimate backstabber, a woman who would use charm one minute and icy cruelty the next. But perhaps the most shocking thing about Miriam Hopkins is that she never apologized for her tactics. In a world where softness could be exploited, Hopkins wore her reputation like a badge of honor. "I fight for what's mine," she once said. "Hollywood isn't a place for the meek." For those who crossed her, those words rang hauntingly true. Wallace Berry. Wallace Berry's gruff charm and everyman appeal made him one of MGM's biggest stars. But beneath that affable exterior lurked a reputation for being one of Hollywood's most unpleasant and even dangerous men. Unlike some cruel stars whose actions were whispered about in back rooms, Berry's bad behavior was an open secret among actors, crew, and even child stars. Berry was infamous for his bullying and physical intimidation. Child actor Jackie Cooper, who starred alongside Berry in The Champ, recalled being pinched and terrorized off camera so he would cry on cue. These weren't one-off incidents. Numerous co-stars described a pattern of cruelty that ranged from deliberate sabotage on set to outright hostility in private. But perhaps the darkest rumors surrounding Berry have never been fully proven or disproven. Some in Hollywood whispered that he was involved in the mysterious death of producer Thomas Ince, though no charges were ever filed. Studio executives, terrified of what Berry might reveal about MGM's inner workings, reportedly kept him under contract just to keep him quiet. Yet the public rarely saw this side of Berry. His performances won hearts and earned him an Oscar. But those who worked with him learned to stay out of his way. For all his box office success, Berry's legacy is a chilling reminder that charm on screen can hide darkness behind the scenes. Clark Gable. Known as the King of Hollywood, Clark Gable epitomized masculinity and charisma to Depression-era audiences. But behind the smile that melted millions of hearts was a man with a complicated and often cruel private life. Gable's charm was matched only by his ruthlessness, both in his career and personal relationships. Hollywood insiders whispered about Gable's string of affairs, often involving married women, and his willingness to discard lovers when they no longer served his interests. One of the most troubling stories involved actress Loretta Young, his co-star in Call of the Wild. After a controversial incident on set, Young disappeared from the public eye for months, only to later adopt her own child, one widely rumored to be Gable's, the product of a traumatic event she would only speak of decades later. Gable's cruelty didn't stop at his personal life. He was known to bully directors, fight for top billing, and insist on having his way on set, even at the expense of his colleagues. Studio fixers were often called in to clean up his messes, keeping scandals out of the press. But perhaps the most telling sign of Gable's dark side was the way studios bent over backward to protect his image. For all his on-screen bravado, Clark Gable was a star whose reign was built not just on talent, but on the pain and silence of those around him. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford is remembered as one of Hollywood's great leading ladies, a rags-to-riches icon with a steely resolve. But the reality behind the glamorous facade was much more disturbing. Crawford's name is now synonymous with cruelty, largely due to the explosive memoir Mommy Dearest by her adopted daughter, Christina Crawford. In public, Joan was the epitome of class and professionalism, but at home, she ruled with an iron fist. Christina's memoir recounts a life of emotional and physical abuse, beatings for minor infractions, obsessive cleanliness enforced by terrifying midnight inspections, and psychological torment that left deep scars. The infamous no wire hangers incident became a symbol of Crawford's tyrannical rule. Crawford's cruelty wasn't limited to her children. On set, she was notorious for being demanding, vindictive, and impossible to please. Directors and crew dreaded working with her, as she would insist on controlling everything from lighting to costumes and would exact icy revenge on anyone who crossed her. Perhaps most famously, her feud with Bette Davis was fueled by jealousy, pride, and a shared refusal to back down. Joan would go to extraordinary lengths to undermine Davis, including lobbying against her at award season and even physically sabotaging scenes. Joan Crawford's story is a haunting reminder that in old Hollywood, the brightest stars often cast the darkest shadows. Zsa Zsa Gabor. Zsa Zsa Gabor was the embodiment of European glamour, an actress and socialite with a taste for luxury and a knack for making headlines. But beneath the diamonds and witty one-liners was a woman known for cruelty, both public and private. Gabor's sharp tongue and shameless self-promotion were legendary. She openly insulted rivals and ex-husbands, often leaving a trail of public humiliation in her wake. One of her most famous feuds was with actress Elke Sommer, culminating in lawsuits and a bitter war of words. Gabor didn't just enjoy drama, she thrived on it, often stoking the flames with outrageous comments and calculated cruelty. Her sense of entitlement wasn't just for the tabloids. In 1989, Gabor slapped a Beverly Hills police officer during a traffic stop, a move that landed her in court, and in the headlines once again. Her lack of remorse and refusal to back down only cemented her reputation as Hollywood's queen of insults. Yet for all her scandals and unapologetic behavior, Zsa Zsa Gabor never seemed to care what people thought. In her own words, "I deserve attention, not direction." For those who didn't worship her, she made sure they remembered her cruelty just as vividly as her charm. Ava Gardner. Ava Gardner's beauty was legendary. Her green eyes and sultry voice made her an icon of the silver screen. But those who tried to get close to her quickly discovered a much more volatile side. Gardner's cruelty wasn't always calculated. Sometimes it erupted with the force of a hurricane, leaving devastation in its wake. On set, Gardner's lack of patience for weakness or incompetence became notorious. She expected perfection from directors, co-stars, and lovers alike, and anyone who disappointed her was met with biting sarcasm or cold dismissal. Frank Sinatra, perhaps her most famous lover, endured explosive fights and public scenes that kept the gossip columns buzzing for years. Gardner's relationships were marked by passion and volatility. She could be loving one moment and cruel the next, often pushing people away just when they thought they were closest to her. Her drinking and wild partying only added to the chaos. Despite her struggles, Gardner was fiercely independent, never apologizing for her behavior. She played by her own rules, both on screen and off. As she once said, "Deep down, I'm pretty ruthless." And for those who crossed her, that was no empty threat. Bette Davis. Bette Davis's glare could freeze a room, and it wasn't just acting. Known as the Queen of Mean in old Hollywood, Davis combined legendary talent with a ruthless streak that left both fans and colleagues in awe and fear. Davis never cared about being liked. She cared about being the best. She undermined co-stars, belittled directors, and fought studios for control of her roles. Her rivalry with Joan Crawford became the stuff of legend, with both actresses sabotaging each other on and off screen. Davis once quipped that Crawford slept with every male star at MGM except Lassie. But the real battle played out in icy silences and calculated power plays. On set, Davis demanded absolute professionalism on her terms. If a fellow actor wasn't up to her standards, she'd make it known, often humiliating them in front of the crew. Directors learned quickly that Davis would challenge every decision and push for scenes to be done her way. Her ambition and refusal to be submissive in a male-dominated industry made her a trailblazer, but also made her countless enemies. "I survived because I was tougher than anybody else," Davis once said. For some, that toughness bordered on cruelty. Jane Russell. Jane Russell strutted onto the Hollywood scene as a bombshell with a no-nonsense attitude and a presence that couldn't be ignored. While her sultry performances made her a household name, it was her reputation off-screen that kept directors and co-stars on their toes. Russell didn't just speak her mind, she wielded it like a weapon. Russell was notorious for challenging authority. If a director gave her a note she didn't agree with, she would argue, dismiss, or outright ignore it. Crew members described a constant battle of wills. If she thought a scene was beneath her, she'd push back, making the set feel more like a battleground than a collaborative space. Even her legendary partnership with Marilyn Monroe in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes was laced with backhanded remarks and tension, as Russell openly criticized Monroe's work ethic, calling her a helpless child who needed constant reassurance. But Jane's fire didn't burn just for directors and rivals. It singed everyone around her. She had strong opinions about her fellow actors and wasn't shy about expressing them. If Russell didn't like someone, they were essentially finished in her eyes. She built a protective wall around herself, and only a chosen few were ever allowed past it. Despite her difficult reputation, Russell's strength made her an icon for women unwilling to play by Hollywood's rules. She didn't just survive in a tough industry, she made sure everyone else knew she was tougher. But for many who worked with her, Jane Russell was less a friend and more a formidable adversary whose cruelty left a lasting mark. Edward G. Robinson. Edward G. Robinson was the face of Hollywood's classic gangster, the tough, gravel-voiced anti-hero that defined an era. But off-camera, Robinson's cruelty took on a far more chilling form. His volcanic temper and ruthless self-preservation made him feared not just by enemies, but by friends. Robinson's behavior grew more erratic during Hollywood's darkest years, the McCarthy era. When the House Un-American Activities Committee began targeting suspected communists, Robinson made a choice that stunned the industry. In a desperate attempt to save his own career, he named names, pointing fingers at former friends and colleagues, destroying their reputations and livelihoods to protect his own. The fallout was catastrophic. Many never forgave Robinson for what they saw as the ultimate betrayal, selling out friends to the government for personal gain. The pain ran deep, and the whispers of his disloyalty followed him for the rest of his life. But even before the blacklist, Robinson's intimidating presence wasn't just an act for the cameras. Colleagues spoke of his harsh treatment of anyone he considered beneath him, his impatience on set, and his refusal to suffer fools lightly. He could end a career with a glare, and many left a Robinson set with bruised egos, or worse. For all his on-screen bravado, Edward G. Robinson's real-life cruelty left a trail of broken friendships and lost trust. A legacy as complicated as any role he ever played. Gloria Swanson. Swathed in furs and pearls, Gloria Swanson was the queen of Hollywood's silent era, an icon whose every move set trends and whose demands shook studios. Yet behind the allure of opulence and elegance, Swanson's ruthless pursuit of control became the stuff of legend. Swanson didn't just act in films, she dominated them. If a director challenged her, she fought back, rewriting scripts, firing crew members, or walking off productions altogether. During the filming of Queen Kelly, her infamous clash with director Erich von Stroheim resulted in his firing, effectively derailing the film. She later admitted he was a genius, but he wasn't my genius. Her off-screen relationships were equally calculated. Swanson was known for her affairs with some of the most powerful men in Hollywood, including Joseph P. Kennedy, who allegedly funneled money into her productions, until he vanished from her life, replaced by the next power broker who could serve her ambitions. Swanson's drive came at a cost. Co-stars, directors, and even producers learned that working with her meant playing by her rules or being swept aside. Her extravagance, Custom gowns, lavish parties, and a penchant for living large even contributed to her financial woes, but her pride never wavered. For all her talent and beauty, Gloria Swanson was as famous for the chaos she left behind as for the roles she played. The message was clear. In her Hollywood, there was room for only one queen, and she would do anything to keep her crown. Tula Bankhead. Tula Bankhead was the wild card of Hollywood's golden age, an unpredictable force of nature whose sharp wit and defiance of convention made her both captivating and feared. With a razor tongue and a taste for scandal, Bankhead's cruelty was as famous as her talent. On set, directors and co-stars never knew what to expect. She showed up intoxicated, argued over lines, and mocked authority in front of the crew. Her refusal to respect boundaries made her a headache for even the most seasoned professionals. Alfred Hitchcock, who directed her in Lifeboat, reportedly had to work around her outrageous behavior just to keep the production afloat. Bankhead wasn't just difficult, she was openly reckless. She skipped rehearsals, flouted studio rules, and had no problem cursing out executives. Her unpredictable mood swings made her as likely to embrace a colleague as to eviscerate them with a barbed remark. But behind the bravado was a woman who used cruelty as both shield and sword. She publicly belittled rivals like Bette Davis, dismissing her as a little megalomaniac. Her disregard for social niceties was legendary, and she never apologized for making others uncomfortable. For a while, Hollywood tolerated Bankhead's antics because of her undeniable star power. But even in an industry that thrived on drama, there were limits, and Bankhead tested them all, leaving a legacy as wild as her wit and as bruising as her words. Lana Turner. Lana Turner was the quintessential Hollywood siren, her luminous beauty matched only by her tumultuous personal life. But behind the dazzling smile and platinum hair, Turner's manipulative streak was as sharp as any villain she portrayed on screen. Turner was no stranger to scandal. Her relationships were a storm of arguments, threats, and public blow-ups, culminating in the infamous 1958 stabbing of her lover, mobster Johnny Stompanato, by her teenage daughter Cheryl. Though the killing was ruled justifiable homicide, the trial painted Turner as a tragic figure enmeshed in violence, betrayal, and control. But Lana's cruelty wasn't confined to her private life. On set, she demanded loyalty and obedience from everyone around her. Studio heads, lovers, even her own daughter, all played by her rules or faced her wrath. Turner could silence critics with a look or twist any situation to her advantage, ensuring her image remained untarnished even in the face of scandal. Yet for all her resilience and comebacks, like her Academy Award-nominated role in Peyton Place, Turner's legacy remains complicated. She was a woman who survived by manipulating those closest to her, leaving behind a trail of broken relationships and shattered illusions. For many, Lana Turner was as cruel as she was captivating, a true Hollywood enigma. Marlene Dietrich. With her smoky voice and androgynous style, Marlene Dietrich was the very embodiment of Hollywood allure. But while she captivated audiences with her mystique, Dietrich's real-life persona was less enchanting for those who crossed her. Dietrich understood power better than most. She wasn't just beautiful and talented, but cunning and merciless in maintaining her status. If she wanted a role, she got it. If a rival stood in her way, they mysteriously vanished from the scene. She kept influential men, directors, producers, studio heads, wrapped around her finger, using them as pawns in her relentless pursuit of control. Her clashes with directors were legendary. Dietrich was known for demanding control over lighting and costumes, sometimes going so far as to physically confront those who challenged her vision. Alfred Hitchcock, among others, called her the most obstinate actress he'd ever worked with. Dietrich's cruelty extended beyond the set. After clashing with a co-star, she once warned, "Your career will be over before you know it," and made sure the threat was no idle boast. She used her reputation as a weapon, and few dared to stand in her way. Even her activism during World War II, while courageous, was overshadowed in private by her readiness to manipulate and discard anyone she no longer needed. Marlene Dietrich was more than a star. She was a Hollywood puppet master, her legacy one of brilliance and breathtaking cruelty. Harlo. Jean Harlow's platinum blonde hair and sultry smile made her one of Hollywood's brightest stars, but beneath the surface, she was a master manipulator. Harlow knew that beauty alone wouldn't keep her at the top, so she learned to outplay, outmaneuver, and, if necessary, outcruel anyone in her path. Harlow's relationships with studio executives were strategic. She built alliances with powerful men, ensuring she always had leverage. If a rival actress threatened her position, mysterious stories would circulate. Roles suddenly lost, careers inexplicably stalled. Insiders spoke in hushed tones about the Harlow Clause, an unspoken rule that crossing Jean meant risking your future in Hollywood. She wasn't above using her appeal to get what she wanted, nor did she mind stepping on others' toes if it protected her image. Harlow's tactics weren't limited to the boardroom. On set, she could turn from charming to cold in an instant, using flattery one moment and biting criticism the next. Her sudden death at just 26 cut short a career defined by ambition, strategy, and a relentless will to win. But even in her brief reign, Jean Harlow cemented her status as a power player, one who never let sentimentality stand in the way of success. Her beauty dazzled millions, but those who got too close learned that Hollywood's golden girl could also be its most ruthless. Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin, forever remembered as the little tramp, that sweet, bumbling clown who could make the world laugh through tears. But the genius who charmed millions on the silver screen carried a much darker shadow behind the scenes. Chaplin's cruelty didn't always look like screaming tantrums or public feuds. It often hid in manipulation, obsession, and a shocking disregard for those closest to him. Chaplin's personal relationships were marked by scandal and controversy. He married 4 times, with several of his wives much younger than him. One, Lita Gray, was only 16 when Chaplin, at 35, married her. Their marriage quickly devolved into a public disaster, with accusations of emotional manipulation, strict control, and relentless criticism. Another woman, Joan Berry, took him to court in a sensational lawsuit. The drama splashed across headlines, but few questioned the emotional toll left on those who crossed paths with the iconic comedian. Even in his professional life, Chaplin demanded perfection. His obsession with control led to endless retakes, and he was known to reduce actors and crew to exhaustion in pursuit of his vision. Collaborators quickly realized that Chaplin's charm could turn ice cold if his standards weren't met, and few dared to challenge his authority. Later, Chaplin's political views drew suspicion during the Red Scare. When he left the U.S. for Europe in 1952, the government barred his return, leaving behind a Hollywood legacy built as much on ruthlessness as on genius. To millions, Chaplin was the world's beloved clown, but to those in his orbit, he was a master manipulator who left wounds behind the laughter. Barbara Stanwyck. Barbara Stanwyck stood as a monument to grit and steely determination in old Hollywood. Her striking beauty and fierce independence made her a legend, but it was her cold, calculating approach to both her work and relationships that truly set her apart. Stanwyck's reputation as the Ice Queen wasn't just a catchy nickname, it was a warning. On set, Stanwyck brooked no nonsense. She ran her productions like a military operation, expecting flawless performances not just from herself, but from everyone around her. Fred MacMurray, her co-star in Double Indemnity, once described working with her as an endurance test, noting that she had little patience for laziness or hesitation. If you failed to meet her standards, you were simply out. No second chances, no explanations. But Stanwyck's discipline extended beyond professionalism. She was fiercely protective of her career and her image, always one step ahead of rumors or studio politics. Studio executives learned that crossing her was a mistake, and co-stars knew better than to get on her bad side. She maintained a tight grip on her narrative, expertly spinning stories to the press to maintain her icy, untouchable persona. Yet her control often left those around her feeling shut out and diminished. Stanwyck was not one for emotional connections. Her strength came at the expense of warmth, leaving a trail of exhausted collaborators and uneasy admirers. In Hollywood, she was respected and feared in equal measure. A woman who built her own legend by never letting anyone see her sweat or her heart. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn, the devil-may-care swashbuckler of Hollywood's golden age, seemed to embody reckless charm, But behind the adventurous facade lurked a man whose wild, cruel antics left a wake of scandal and suffering. Flynn's life off-screen was a tornado of excess, rumors, and boundary-smashing behavior that made even his friends uneasy. Flynn's personal life was a carousel of lavish parties, explosive relationships, and brazen law-breaking. He once boasted, "I like old whiskey and young women," a motto that landed him in more than one tabloid scandal. His mansion became the stuff of Hollywood legend, whispered about for its secret rooms and wild goings-on. But Flynn's cruelty extended far beyond mere partying. He was known to manipulate, discard, or humiliate those he considered beneath him. Directors and co-stars often dreaded working with him, knowing that his disregard for rules meant chaos on set. He was also surrounded by darker rumors, shady wartime connections, and behavior that bordered on criminal. While not all allegations were proven, the air around Flynn always seemed heavy with menace. Despite his public fall from grace and untimely death at 50, Flynn's legacy as a reckless, dangerous star endures. The studios may have covered for him, but those closest to him were never fooled. Errol Flynn was as cruel as he was captivating, a storm that left scars wherever it went. Robert Mitchum. Robert Mitchum cut the figure of Hollywood's ultimate cool rebel, a man who made danger look irresistible. But while audiences were drawn to his easygoing charm and tough guy roles, those behind the camera saw a different side, a man whose irreverence and disdain for authority could be downright cruel. Mitchum wore his rebellious streak like a badge of honor. He was infamous for his run-ins with the law, including a highly publicized drug bust in 1948, and for treating every studio rule as optional. But it was on set that his true unpredictability emerged. Directors had to contend with his open defiance, his willingness to improvise or toss scripts aside, and his penchant for turning bar fights or verbal sparring into real-life dramas. Mitchum's relationships with co-stars and crew ranged from dismissive to openly antagonistic. He mocked those he considered pretentious, taunted anyone who got on his nerves, and had little patience for actors he thought couldn't keep up. He could go from charming to caustic in a flash, leaving colleagues walking on eggshells. Yet somehow, Mitchum's recklessness only added to his mystique. Hollywood's wild wind, he seemed untouchable by scandal or consequence. For those forced to work with him, however, his cruelty wasn't just an act. It was a force to be reckoned with, leaving bruised egos and battered pride in its wake. Clara Bow. Clara Bow, Hollywood's original it girl, sparkled on screen with an energy and innocence that defined the Roaring Twenties. But her meteoric rise from poverty to stardom came with deep scars and a reputation for cruelty that haunted her brief but brilliant career. Bow's childhood was one of deprivation and trauma, shadowed by a mentally ill mother and constant upheaval. Those wounds shaped a star who was charming one moment, explosively unpredictable the next. As fame grew, so did her defensive, sometimes abusive behavior. She became notorious for mistreating staff, berating younger actresses she saw as rivals, and lashing out at those she didn't trust. On set, Bow's mood swings made working with her a gamble. She could be wildly generous, then turn witheringly critical without warning. Some say her studios even exploited her unraveling mental health for publicity rather than offering her help. Her accent and image didn't translate well to the talkies, and the pressure only made her more volatile. By the age of 28, Bow's career was all but over, her defensive cruelty having alienated most of Hollywood. The it girl faded into obscurity, a bittersweet reminder that old Hollywood could chew up and spit out even its brightest stars. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe remains the ultimate icon of Golden Age Hollywood. Her breathy voice, platinum hair, and luminous beauty made her a legend. But for those tasked with working alongside her, Marilyn's cruelty manifested less in overt hostility and more in a passive-aggressive chaos that exhausted everyone around her. Monroe's struggles with anxiety, lateness, and substance abuse became notorious. Directors and co-stars soon learned that every shoot was a gamble. Forgotten lines, emotional breakdowns, and endless retakes plagued even her most iconic films. Billy Wilder, who directed her in Some Like It Hot, described her as a nightmare, but a dream on screen. Tony Curtis, her co-star, famously compared kissing her to kissing Hitler, Such was the strain of working with her. Marilyn's need for reassurance and perfectionism masked a deeper pain, but her unpredictability, frequent absences, and erratic behavior left productions over budget and schedules in tatters. Crew members dreaded the emotional roller coaster, while fellow actors resented her ability to hijack an entire set. Yet Monroe's magnetism was undeniable. She could be warm and vulnerable, then suddenly cold or indifferent. The legends of her cruelty aren't always tales of meanness. They're stories of a wounded soul who, trapped by fame, often lashed out at those trying to help. For all her beauty and allure, Marilyn Monroe left behind a trail of frustrated directors, disillusioned colleagues, and a Hollywood forever changed by her tragic brilliance. Veronica Lake. Veronica Lake, with her iconic peekaboo hairstyle and enigmatic allure, became a defining beauty of the 1940s. But her ethereal presence on screen masked a personality that could be as chilling as it was charming. Lake's cruelty was not the product of grand scandals, but of a steady, unyielding refusal to play by anyone's rules but her own. Lake quickly gained a reputation for being nearly impossible to work with. She clashed with almost everyone: directors, producers, co-stars. Alan Ladd, her frequent on-screen partner, once admitted he despised working with her, and others, like Frederick March and Claudette Colbert, refused to collaborate with her a second time. Lake's behavior extended beyond set. She skipped meetings, ignored studio advice, and showed little regard for the politics that kept careers afloat. What stung most was Lake's apparent indifference. She was not overtly cruel, but her unwillingness to cooperate made her toxic in an industry built on collaboration. As the roles dried up, her reputation for coldness followed her into obscurity, and she eventually faded from the public eye, reportedly working as a waitress in her later years. Veronica Lake's story is a cautionary tale. Hollywood's darling undone not by scandal, but by a streak of stubborn cruelty that left her alone, a faded star in a world she once captivated. And there you have it, the truth behind the dazzling smiles and legendary careers. These 21 stars defined Hollywood's golden age, but their legacies are forever shadowed by stories of shocking cruelty, manipulation, and heartache. If these shocking secrets surprised you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Hollywood revelations. Join us next time for another journey behind the scenes, only on our channel.